All right, set your DVRs. Never miss an episode of The Five. Special Report is up next. Never faint when you watch this show. Hey, Brett.
Thank you. Thanks, Dana. President Trump is not backing down on his declaration of a national emergency to build a border wall as he speaks out against socialism and for change in Venezuela. Chicago police want to talk again with the actor who says he was assaulted by pro-Trump attackers, but now his story does not seem to be adding up. And we began a week-long series on the controversial political manifesto known as the Green New Deal that has presidential candidates scrambling. This is Special Report. Good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Brett Baer. President Trump says a new day is coming in Latin America. The president speaking to members of the Venezuelan American community a short time ago in Miami. The speech comes as the president hangs tough against critics of his decision to declare a national emergency over southern border immigration. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts starts us off tonight, as he often does, from the North Lawn. Good evening, John.
Brett, good evening to you. Today, the National Security Advisor John Bolton told a crowd in Miami that he would not use the U.S. military to move humanitarian supplies from neighboring Colombia into Venezuela. But President Trump today used the bully pulpit of the presidency to put more pressure on Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro to step down. President Trump was focused on foreign policy in a speech in Miami this afternoon, throwing his full support behind Venezuela's interim president, Juan Guaido.
The people of Venezuela are standing for freedom and democracy, and the United States of America is standing right by their side.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro continues to hang on to power. President Trump now upping the pressure on military leaders to back Guaido and allow humanitarian aid into the country. The president threatening to strip military leaders of their wealth.
You must not follow Maduro's orders to block humanitarian aid, and you must not threaten any form of violence against peaceful protesters, opposition leaders, members of the National Assembly, or President Guaido and his family.
President Trump is also preparing to defend his emergency declaration to build a border wall. Today, Democratic groups organized protests against the president's move, including this one across the street from the White House. Already, the group Public Citizen has filed a lawsuit against the emergency declaration in D.C. District Court. California Attorney General Javier Becerra also taking President Trump to court today.
We'll be joined by at least a dozen states. The separation of powers being violated, we're going to go out there and make sure that Donald Trump cannot steal money from the states and the people who need them, since we paid the taxpayer dollars to Washington, D.C. to get those services.
More than half of the $8 billion the White House identified to build the border wall does not depend on the emergency declaration. The $1.37 billion from Congress can be used immediately, as can the $601 million from the Treasury Forfeiture Fund and money already in the DOD's Counter-Drug Fund. Reprogramming $2.2 billion in the DOD budget into that counter-drug fund will take a little longer. The only thing that requires the emergency declaration is shifting $3.6 billion in the military construction budget to build the wall. White House officials say President Trump is on solid legal ground to do that.
We have the presidential authority to do so. Congress has these statutes. We feel like we're on solid legal ground on this issue.
Democrats in Congress say they will introduce legislation next week after they return from this week's recess to block the president's emergency declaration. White House officials this weekend suggested if Congress were to pass such a measure, President Trump may for the first time use the power of his veto pen to kill it. Brett?
More on this with the panel. John, thank you. Chicago police have more questions for an actor who says he was targeted for assault by men who yelled anti-gay, anti-black, and pro-Trump comments to him. Tonight, there's growing disbelief Jussie Smollett actually arranged the whole thing. He denies that. We have Fox team coverage. Senior political analyst Brit Hume on how politicians and the media are running for cover after championing Smollett's claims before the investigation. First up, senior correspondent Mike Tobin with the latest in Chicago. Good evening, Mike.
Good evening, Brett. And TMZ reported that the Smollett case is headed to a grand jury, but Chicago police say you can't talk about a grand jury until they have one more talk with the actor. Chicago police say they no longer consider Jussie Smollett, an actor from the drama Empire, a victim, and now they're pushing for a follow-up interview. Smollett, however, is holed up, with his PR and legal team releasing a statement that there are no plans to meet with Chicago police today. Smollett's attorneys will keep an active dialogue going with Chicago police on his behalf. The request for the meeting came after police detained and interrogated the Osundario brothers, aspiring actors, at least one of whom worked on Empire. One was Smollett's personal trainer. Police raided the Chicago apartment where they stayed. Anonymous police sources said cops now have physical evidence, like a receipt for a rope allegedly put around the actor's neck. Statements or evidence to show the attack was rehearsed and the brothers were paid. Official sources said only that police have developed new evidence from the interviews and the brothers were released.
Innocence prevailed, all right? My guys are walking home. They're not charged. They are not suspects in this case.
Smollett's story is that on January 29th, he was attacked in Chicago's Streeterville neighborhood, that his white attackers shouted racist and homophobic slurs at him. One attacker told him this is MAGA country. Actor Zachary Quinto tweeted that he had the privilege of reading with Jussie Smollett in the play Take Me Out, a play about a gay, biracial baseball player subject to violence similar to the alleged attack. The list of those who went public with their outrage over the attack ranges from Moonlight director Barry Jenkins, who tweeted, "This is what all the hateful mongering has wrought. Are you proud?" to actress Ellen Page, who blamed Vice President Mike Pence.
You spend your career trying to cause suffering. What do you think is going to happen? Kids are going to be abused, and they're going to kill themselves. And people are going to be beaten on the street.
Now, anger is directed at Smollett.
And if it is found that Smollett and these gentlemen did in some way perpetrate something that is not true, they ought to face accountability to the maximum.
In Illinois, falsifying a police report is a felony with a maximum penalty of 3 years and a $25,000 fine. Legal experts say Smollett, no criminal background, not violent, if charged, if convicted, would probably be looking at probation. Brett.
Mike Tobin in Chicago. Mike, thanks. Here are some of the comments made by some Democrats after Smollett's initial claims. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, the racist, homophobic attack on Jussie Smollett is an affront to our humanity. No one should be attacked for who they are or whom they love. New Jersey Senator and presidential candidate Cory Booker, the vicious attack on actor Jussie Smollett was an attempted modern-day lynching. Some of these tweets obviously have been taken down. Let's talk about the rush to judgment. Senior political analyst Brit Hume joins us tonight. Good evening, Brit. Your thoughts on this case and what it says broadly?
Well, I think it says a couple of things, Brett. One is that people too quickly jump to conclusions in instances of this kind. We've seen a whole series of examples of this in recent times. You know, the Covington Catholic schoolboys at the Lincoln Memorial, people bought into the first version of that, which turned out not to be correct. Now it appears this Smollett attack may not turn out to be what he claimed it was. The people like the politicians you cited and the people Mike cited in his report certainly deserve a big share of the blame. But our media colleagues, Brett, a lot of them, and the Chicago media, I think, did pretty well with this. They treated it as an alleged attack, but too many in the national press treated the attack as something that obviously had happened. They referred to it not as the alleged attack, but the attack, and the homophobic or the racist attack, and headlines were filled with that. It's a lesson that some of our colleagues seem to have had a hard time learning. Maybe this will teach them.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, the president was asked about it, too, and said, I can tell you that's horrible. Saw it last night. I think it's horrible. It doesn't get any worse. In the initial times, people are looking for reaction. But you're right about the media. I mean, there was a lot of racing to a conclusion.
Yeah, there was one columnist in the Washington Post, writer in the Washington Post over the weekend who was talking about how she didn't like to feel this way, but she hoped the story turned out to be true. That is a bizarre way to look at this. You know, Brett, you have to wonder at a time like this, what would motivate this young actor with a very promising career who was on a successful series on Fox in which the producers are now saying that he was a valued member of the cast, that this wasn't done as was once speculated to try to save his job, that he's in good shape there, and he goes and does this. And the risk he took in doing it is so great that you have to wonder why anyone would take it. I don't know that anybody, but he knows. But there is this. In America today, victim status can be a valuable thing. And you saw, women during the Kavanaugh hearing, some of whom obviously were not telling the truth, rushing out to join the Me Too parade and accusing him. And I think that it's because in this country today, victims are often lionized as heroes. And perhaps this young man thought that if he could achieve victim status by virtue of this, he'd not only be a successful, young, promising actor with a big career ahead of him, but he would also be a lionized victim, a hero. At least that seems to me a possibility.
Last thing, what does it also say about what we're getting ready to go into, which is a presidential election where Democrats are going to be running against the president on a number of fronts, but also just broadly because he is who he is, and Make America Great Again, and its perception gets a visceral response, especially from the left.
It does, and it connotes to a lot of people racism and homophobia and bigotry of all kinds that they associate with this president. The word is flung around, as you've heard, the word racist is flung around with abandon today. Look, I don't think Donald Trump will go down in history as a civil rights leader, but I'm not sure the case that he is a racist, which is going to be, we're going to hear that now going forward. We've been hearing it for a couple of years. It's bound to continue. I'm not sure that's well established. And I think, that there's an attempt in this country to make, I think a lot of journalists kind of like this view, that it's 1963 still, and Bull Connor and the age of George Wallace are still where we are. And I think that's part of the message here and part of what people believe. I don't think that most Americans believe that, but there it is.
We don't know what this story is going to be, and we will cover it as it unfolds. Brett, as always, thank you.
Thank you.
Many of the Democrats who want to remove the president from office after the 2020 election are in New Hampshire this President's Day. Correspondent Peter Ducey is with them, reports from Nashua tonight.
Over the long weekend, it was house party after house party in New Hampshire for the senator from New Jersey.
I don't believe in coincidences. Today is President's Day.
The central theme of the Cory Booker campaign is love.
People tell me if you're going to beat Trump, you got to bring it. Well, I believe in bringing it, but not bringing more of what Trump is bringing. Because in many ways, that's what he wants.
Booker also talks a lot about climate change, but insists transforming society with the Green New Deal, which he co-sponsors, isn't too expensive to do.
But this is the lie that's going on right now. As a guy who's a former mayor, that shows you can actually revive your economy and create a bold green future. We environmentally retrofitted our buildings, saved taxpayers money, created jobs for our community, and lowered our carbon footprint.
Nearby, Booker had some competition from Kamala Harris.
I plan on competing in New Hampshire.
But Harris wouldn't say whether she regrets reacting to the Jussie Smollett case by tweeting, quote, "This was an attempted modern-day lynching."
Which tweet? What tweet?
About saying that it is a modern-day lynching, that...
Sorry.
Yes, Jussie Smollett.
Okay, so I will say this about that case. I think that the facts are still unfolding, and I'm very concerned.
And don't look for Harris to adjust her beliefs to match Bernie Sanders, who won New Hampshire easily in 2016.
But I will tell you, I am not a Democratic socialist.
So Senator Harris is signaling she will be different than the Democratic socialist Sanders, who lives right next door in Vermont, because she'll be closer to the center, which is counter to what Democratic primary candidates generally try to do, get as far to the left as possible. Brett?
Peter Ducey in the chilly Nashua. Peter, thanks. We have new information tonight about the effort by some in the Justice Department to possibly remove President Trump from office, or at least talk about it. It comes amid the uproar over comments from former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, who says he was fired because he opened an investigation into the president, not for lying to investigators about media leaks. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge tells us what she's learning.
Counting votes or possible votes.
The former acting FBI director told 60 Minutes that Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein openly discussed how many cabinet members would support invoking the 25th Amendment to remove the president. But the FBI's former general counsel James Baker, who met contemporaneously with McCabe and FBI lawyer Lisa Page about their conversations with Rosenstein, testified the effort went further. Quote, "I had the impression that the Deputy Attorney General had already discussed this with 2 members in the president's cabinet, and that they were on board with this concept already." On Twitter, the president responded to McCabe on 60 Minutes, quote, "Wow, so many lies by now disgraced acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe. He and Rod Rosenstein looked like they were planning a very illegal act." McCabe and others say the president's May 2017 firing of Director James Comey left the FBI and Justice Department in turmoil amid concern that the firing was designed to desync the Russia probe and obstruct justice.
The Deputy Attorney General offered to wear a wire into the White House. He said, "I never get searched when I go into the White House." I think the general counsel had a heart attack. And when he got up off the floor, he said, that's a bridge too far.
But Baker, who could face criminal penalties for lying to congressional investigators, testified, quote, "My recollection is that there were discussions about it over a longer period than the course of one meeting, a couple of days." McCabe said Rosenstein initially resisted a special counsel because the Deputy Attorney General worried he might lose his job. A senior department official told Fox Tonight the special counsel was appointed, quote, "to ensure that the Russia investigation was truly independent and without bias," something the official said that McCabe could not have accomplished. Brett?
Catherine, thank you. Up next, why British lawmakers say Facebook is acting like a gangster with information about you. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 50 in Raleigh, as North Carolina's elections director, says investigators found a coordinated, unlawful absentee ballot scheme in last year's 9th congressional district voting. The comment came at the opening of a state elections board hearing. Republican Mark Harris holds a slim lead over Democrat Dan McCready in unofficial results, but the election was not certified. The board is expected to either certify a winner or order a new election. Fox 11 in Green Bay, as Wisconsin Democratic Governor Tony Evers says his budget will include proposals to decriminalize possession of small amounts of marijuana for personal use and legalize medical marijuana. Evers says it's time Wisconsin joins more than 30 other states and the District of Columbia in legalizing medical marijuana. And this is a live look at Chicago from our affiliate, Fox 32. One of the big stories there tonight, the investigation into Friday's workplace shooting in suburban Aurora. Police say a man who killed 5 co-workers had his state gun license permit revoked in 2014. The wife of one victim says her husband texted, "I love you. I've been shot at work." That's tonight's live look. Outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back. An Alabama woman who reportedly posted a tweet encouraging Americans to kill themselves after joining ISIS years ago is now begging for officials to let her back into the U.S. The plea from Hoda Muthana comes following her recent escape from ISIS and capture by Kurdish forces. She is being held in a refugee camp in northeast Syria. State Department spokeswoman Heather Nauert is expected to leave the Trump administration soon. That is according to a source familiar with the situation. Nauert had been nominated by the president to serve as UN ambassador. But an investigation revealed she had hired a nanny without an appropriate work visa and did not pay taxes on the employee at the time. Nauert has withdrawn that nomination. She is a former anchor on this channel. British lawmakers are going after Facebook again. They are calling for tougher rules on the social media giant and others who they say act like criminals with information about you. Here's senior foreign affairs correspondent Greg Palcott in London tonight.
Facebook under fire again, branded as digital gangsters in the online world. A UK Parliament committee wrapping up an 18-month probe into fake news and disinformation. The study determined Facebook considers itself to be ahead of and beyond the law.
there have been serious failings over the failing to act against harmful content, the failure to protect users' privacy, and also I think failures on their part in the way they gather data and make it available to other organisations without users' informed consent.
At issue, the use of Facebook by foreign governments to influence elections, possible Russian involvement in the UK's Brexit vote, for example, and the UK-based Cambridge Analytica firm's use of Facebook data to target potential Trump voters in 2016.
What this does is at least make the Facebook itself realise it has responsibilities, not just as a platform, but as a publisher.
Singled out Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg. While he testified on Capitol Hill, he refused to come to London. He's accused of showing contempt. A Facebook UK executive says the company shares the committee's concerns about false news and election integrity and is open to meaningful regulation. More regulation could be on the way, the report recommending a series of laws to be put in place along with already strong digital guidelines.
The U.S. Congress is conducting its own digital probe. Republican Senator Marco Rubio last month proposed a new law to rein in the likes of Facebook. The explosive findings from this UK report could provide more support. Brett.
Greg Palcott in London. Greg, thanks. Up next, we begin a week-long analysis of Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's controversial Green New Deal. First, beyond our borders tonight, the International Rescue Committee says at least 62 people have died in recent weeks, mainly from exhaustion and malnutrition, after making their way out of militant-held territory in Syria. It says 2/3 were children under the age of 1. Poland's prime minister has canceled plans for his country to send a delegation to a meeting in Jerusalem after the acting Israeli foreign minister said Poles, quote, collaborated with the Nazis and sucked anti-Semitism from their mother's milk. The developments come in a bitter conflict over how to remember and characterize Polish actions toward Jews during the German occupation of Poland in World War II. Dozens of first-time female candidates who are seeking victory in Nigeria's election are urging each other to stay strong. Voting has been delayed at the last minute until February 23rd. About 50 females running for state and local seats are using social media to tell each other to remain focused. The percentage of women in Nigeria's parliament is one of the lowest in the world. Just some of the other stories beyond our borders. Tonight we begin a week-long analysis of one of the most controversial political manifestos to emerge in quite some time. Freshman New York Congresswoman, self-described socialist Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has come up with something called the Green New Deal. We should note Massachusetts Democrat Senator Ed Markey also made the original Green New Deal pitch. But the only thing turning green right now seems to be other Democrats forced to defend a strategy that even some in the mainstream media are mocking. Correspondent Doug McKelway begins our reporting.
Never in our history have the interest of all Americans been so united.
If unity about climate change ever existed, within moments of the Green New Deal rollout, it tore apart. 2 days before this press conference, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez posted a Green New Deal FAQ segment on her website, referencing the alleged 10 years that mankind has to save the Earth. The post said, quote, "We aren't sure that we'll be able to fully get rid of farting cows and airplanes that fast." It also promised, quote, "economic security for all unable or unwilling to work." A torrent of ridicule followed.
Well, if the Green New Deal took hold, I think our grid would stop.
It sounds like a high school term paper that got a low mark.
Within hours, Ocasio-Cortez's office deleted the FAQ from her website. The following Saturday, her chief of staff tweeted it was an early draft posted by mistake. The night before, an advisor to Ocasio-Cortez offered a different explanation.
No, she's actually tweeted it out to laugh at it. If you look at her latest tweets, it seems that apparently some Republicans have put it out there.
The Cornell professor was mistakenly referring to a parody of the FAQ tweeted by right-wing commentator Mark Dice. Dice inserted into the real document a guarantee for massage chairs and a call for American men to recycle urine. Mitch McConnell, well known for his disdain of show votes, announced a show vote.
See how they feel about the Green New Deal.
This cheap, cynical ploy evidently represents the sum total of Senate Republicans' leadership on the vital issue of climate change.
67 Democrats signed on to
The target age for recruiters are not fit to serve in the military. And for the first time in over a dozen years, the Army missed its recruiting goal. Most recruits come from the South and Midwest, not coastal cities. Now 2 young sergeants are changing the approach using social media and hip-hop.
Loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, earn more. Don't be a hostage to college, paying a mortgage, honor, integrity, personal courage, eating up beer like a bowl full of porridge. I'm above all, supporting and serving, I'm soaring.
Sergeants First Class Jason Locke and Orlando Sutton both served in Iraq,
Come join the Army best where the best is next.
where Sutton first began making rap videos like Enlisted, which has 1.2 million views.
Come join the best team, we lead tomorrow.
Now we have social media, we have Instagram, Facebook, to pass out the Army's message, telling a little bit of the Army story and saying, hey, if you give everything you got, the Army will change your life.
Their new recruiting video explains the Army has 150 different jobs: dog handlers, chefs, mechanics, military police, not just snipers and paratroopers. Recruiting is hard when the economy is good, so they began meeting young people where they hang out, online.
I think we've used Uncle Sam for 104 years. I want you. I think that type of deal is kind of played out. We still do the old school type of way, but we're just trying to, regain traction.
With videos like this, the Army is targeting video game conventions through esports, not just using cold calls and coaches. The Army is targeting 22 cities. Recruiting numbers are already up by double digits in Los Angeles, Boston, and Minneapolis. Brett?
Jennifer Griffin at the Pentagon. Jennifer, thanks. The American sailor, believed to be the one shown kissing a woman in Times Square, celebrating the end of World War II, has died. The daughter of George Mendoza says he had a seizure Sunday at the assisted living facility in Rhode Island, where he lived with his wife of 70 years. Mendoza was shown kissing Greta Zimmer Friedman, a dental assistant in a nurse's uniform, on August 14, 1945. That is known as VJ Day, when Japan surrendered to the U.S. The photo by Alfred Eisenstadt made the cover of Life magazine, became one of the most famous photographs of the 20th century. Greta Friedman died in 2016 at the age of 92. George Mendoza was 90.
The Venezuelan people have spoken, and the world has heard their beautiful voice. They are turning the page on socialism, turning the page on dictatorship, and there will be no going back. The twilight hour of socialism has arrived in our hemisphere, and frankly, in many, many places around the world. The days of socialism and communism are numbered. I ask every member of the Maduro regime, end this nightmare of poverty, hunger, and death for your people. Let your people go.
President Trump in Miami talking to the Venezuelan American community down there. 2 fronts on this message, one being to change the regime in Venezuela and the disputed President Maduro, also get humanitarian aid flowing in there. But second, the message on socialism and how that also really transfers to the 2020 election to come. Let's bring in our panel. Chris Stirewalt is politics editor here at Fox News, Molly Hemingway, senior editor at The Federalist, and Charles Lane, opinion writer for The Washington Post. Okay, Chris, obviously the direct foreign policy effort on Venezuela, but there's a broader theme here.
That's right. And at the moment where Democrats and a lot of younger voters are reconsidering how they feel about socialism and is socialism okay, and at the very moment where some very prominent Democrats, including the second place finisher in 2016 for the Democrats, Bernie Sanders, embraces the label, this is very good for the president to be able to say, well, this is what socialism looks like. This is if you go to another country and see it in practice, what's being described. This is what it is. So it's very much on brand, and it's very useful and probably a good thing to talk about in a swing state. Chuck?
Well, you know, a lot of Democrats actually support President Trump on policy toward Venezuela. It's true there's been a lot of attention on the usual Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez because she doesn't, but the local delegation from Florida, Donna Shalala, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and so on, And there are a number of others in both the Senate and the House who, for a rare occasion, have actually seen eye to eye with the president on a matter of foreign policy. And let's not forget, this Venezuelan community, which interacts very closely with the Cuban-American community down there, is going to influence the 2020 elections in Florida. This is not just a question of making a negative statement about socialism. It is also, in terms of domestic politics, rallying the Latino community of South Florida on Donald Trump's side.
Molly.
And it's also just a good reminder that the whole world is full of regions, or the whole world has places of conflict, and that we need to be making sure that we're not involved in places where we're fighting wars of the past and looking at situations that are becoming a big problem in our own hemisphere.
All right, a lot of attention on 60 Minutes. The former deputy director of the FBI speaking out about the possibility of using the 25th Amendment to remove the president.
A discussion of the 25th Amendment was simply Rod raised the issue and discussed it with me in the context of thinking about how many other cabinet officials might support such an effort. I didn't have much to contribute, to be perfectly honest, in that conversation.
Rosenstein was actually openly talking about whether there was a majority of the cabinet who would vote to remove the president.
That's correct. Counting votes or possible votes.
So since then, there's been a little bit of a walk back from McCabe on that. Take a reaction from the White House and Capitol Hill.
McCabe has no credibility. He was obviously fired by the FBI. We know he's lied on multiple occasions, including under oath, and he's a partisan hack. So he's trying to sell a book, but the mere fact is that he's a liar.
I promise your viewers the following, that we will have a hearing about who's telling the truth, what actually happened.
Chris.
Andrew McCabe is definitely, he is formed in the shape of James Comey. He's like a pocket James Comey. It's the same idea. You have a guy who leaves essentially in disgrace. You have a guy who is not esteemed by either party. You have a guy who an Inspector General's report found him to have lied to his colleagues at the FBI about leaking. And then he says, well, Comey said I could leak. And Comey said, I never said that. There are so many contradictions. There's so much wrong here. And what he is pretty obviously trying to do is, as Comey did before him, audition as a resistance figure. He wants to be embraced by Democrats and liberals and say, I am part of this, I am with you now. It's not going to wash.
Which is really the message out of the Justice Department, Molly. The statement being the special counsel was appointed to ensure that the Russia investigation was truly independent and without bias, something that McCabe could not have accomplished.
Yeah, they're making that statement, though, because they understand that there's a bigger picture here. You know, we had two alternative stories going on for the last couple of years. Either the president is a traitor who was compromised by Russia, or our DOJ and FBI acted horrifically poorly. The entire special counsel was set up under false pretenses, and you see just repeated pattern of really bad behavior from people who were trusted to handle law enforcement and intelligence. And I think, yes, you know, Andrew McCabe is someone who was fired for lying about his many leaks to the media. And yes, you've had, 20 other people who have been fired or resigned or quit under pressure because of their bad actions, too. At what point are we going to move away from this conspiracy theory that has no support for it of treasonous collusion with Russia to steal an election? And when are we going to actually deal with the major problems at the FBI and DOJ and the fact that a special counsel was set up by these people who were behaving in an absolutely reprehensible fashion?
Well, one way is to get the end of the Mueller investigation and to find out what the results are, right? And we will eventually, at what time, I don't know. Chuck?
I think that's all in the hands of Bill Barr now. I mean, one of the most important aspects of the new Attorney General's confirmation is that for the first time now we have sort of a full-fledged Attorney General. Full-fledged in the sense that he's not recused from the Russia investigation, full-fledged in the sense he's Senate confirmed, and that he's experienced, widely regarded even among Democrats, even though many of them voted against him, and fully empowered to kind of deal with this. He also knows Bob Mueller very well. And I have to believe that he, too, understands, as you do, that this thing, sooner or later, it has to wind up, and something has to be made public out of it.
Cover it, no matter how it comes out. Next up, did the actor who said he was attacked by pro-Trump thugs actually set the whole thing up? The curious story of Jussie Smollett.